Okie dokie. Now, okay, so welcome to the second presentation, the second module presentation. And again, it is highly recommended for everybody to go through the learning materials. And this presentation includes some key concepts. You can find the details on your study guides. Okay, and again, this one here is my favorite slides. You'll find this until the third or fourth presentations, I believe. So again, please make sure that you download the study guide, the assessment brief, assessment templates. This is the Think Education has provided us with a template for us to work on the on our assessments. Okay. And also make sure you download the subject outline to help guiding our learning. And again, go through each module in the study guide according to the timeline, and roughly one module will take around 2 weeks. And our assessment one, the first assessment is due next week. So let's find a bit of time today with this after this presentation to just briefly talk a little bit about the assessment one tonight. Okay, and contact me. So if you if you struggle or if you get stuck on any other topics or any topics in this subject or the assessments, please do not put do not throw your towel. Send me an email, and I think my response so far is quite good. Almost all emails or messages have been responded by me on the same day, almost, and the rest have been replied on the next day. Okay? And contact the Student Services Center if you need help for non-academic support. Okay. All right. So this is the question I raised when I call people in the first couple of weeks. How are you settling in? So hopefully people are getting better. People are find it start blending into the course. Getting in touch with me and also the students as well, which is fantastic. And this is another one that I would like to remind people to make sure that we have downloaded the relevant materials. If we haven't downloaded the relevant materials such as the study guide and also assessment brief and templates, please do that quickly. Okay? Okay, and if you encounter any problem, academic problem, please contact me via email or message. And for non-academic, please contact the Student Services Center. And how about yourself, Jeff? Are you okay with your how did you find it settling? How did you settling in with this course?
Not too bad at the moment. I've done most of it. I'm up to writing an email to the CEO.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. Thanks a lot. I'm glad that we keep the communication. We keep the communication. I'm glad with that. Really. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Now let's move on. Okay. This is the one that we discussed in module 1. The objective of the study of the subject is basically to capture these areas, these elements here. Establish the risk context, identify risks, analyze risks, and select and implement treatments. Tonight we are going to capture the second one as well tonight. And this one here, establish risk context and also identify risks, are the key points that we need to show in our assessment 1 that is due next week. Okay, so for tonight, this module presentation has a couple of purposes here. The first one is to understand the key concepts of risk identification. There you go, risk identification, and also use the tools when we identify risks. So they're the 2 main points that we'd like to capture tonight. Again, look, please make sure that we are familiar with this risk management process according to the Australia standard, New Zealand standard, ISO 31000:2009, and this is the process framework, basically. Now, one of the tasks in your assessment one basically asks you to do some research about AS, NZS, ISO 31000:2009. If you type that in your Google search box, you'll find tons of articles. What I'm going to do is I'm going to upload my own learning resources in regards to the Australian standard, New Zealand standard, ISO 31000:2009 for us to look at in order to help you addressing the question in the assessment. Okay. Now, again, if we refer to this process, your assessment one is basically about establish the context, identify risk, and communicate and consult. So they are the main points that we need to show in our assessment one. So if we refer assessment one to the risk management process according to the standard, that's how it works. Okay, so we are going to capture the first two elements plus the communicate and consult. All right, now let's summarize a little bit about module one. Okay, in module one, we discuss about the key concepts of risk. We discuss about what we mean by risks. Okay, we also discuss about the establishing the context. Okay, look, like any other management approach. When we want to outline our own planning, we establish the context. With establishing the context, we are actually telling people where we are at. Okay, that is actually helping us providing the insight based on the audit of the current situation. So we do the audit of the current situation. Okay? And we also discuss about the role of risk management when we discuss about why risk management. Okay, organizational approach, sources of risks, risk maturity. We understand that not all organizations have the same level in terms of risk management practice, and we capture that in the risk maturity. And we also discuss about the context, environmental forces, communication, consultation, and we also discuss about the elements that we need to include in the scope. So when we outline the scope, we talk about the several elements such as the goal of the management, of the risk management, and some other issues as well that we need to include in our scope. So pretty much setting the boundaries when we talk about the scope of risk management. Okay, so that's a little bit about the module one as a to refresh again our memory. Okay, now this week we'll focus on the risk identification. Okay, well, look, some people say, well, what is the big deal about risk identification? Every day we talk about risks. When we go to work from A to B, we also we talk about risks. Yes, it is true. Now we are going to take it to the next level, which is basically understanding a few points in risk identification. This includes the sources of risks, right? Where risk could come from, right? The elements that we are going to discuss tonight basically helps us understanding, or if you like, a mapping where risks may come from. Okay. Areas of impact, okay, who would pose the impact, the risk events itself, okay, or risks, in short, we call them as risks, okay, what risk events that we need to identify, which is basically one of the main outcomes in the risk identification process. The causes, now causes in here is quite critical for us to understand. In order for us to understand the risk, when we formulate the risk events, I would suggest that we also need to look at the possible causes. With that, we are specifying the risk events. All right. If we do not specify the risk events, through identifying the possible causes, we are pretty much outlining a generic risk event, and it will be harder for us to solve that. Okay, remember, if we specify our risk events, we are going to have a specific action point, which is fantastic because we can direct our stakeholders in the right directions rather than talking about something in general. Okay, and of course we are going to discuss about the potential impact as well, because risk will bring impact or consequence, and some organizations measure that in dollar term, for instance, and we are going to discuss that in the next module. Okay, all right. Now, first of all, types of risks. There are several approaches to classify risks. We can classify them as strategic risks, project risks, operational risks, financial risks, or corporate governance risks. Okay, so risks basically can come from these fronts, either from our strategy, from our project management, or from our operation, or from our financial, or from the way we manage the company, the way we manage the organization. Okay. Right, now let's have a look at this one here, the strategic risks. Okay. The strategic risks is actually dealing with the decisions in strategic planning process. Okay, all right. So what is the strategic planning? Well, strategic planning, in brief, is the process that the organization undertakes to assess whether they can still compete in the changing environment. Okay, so that means the organization must assess whether they still have the capabilities in the competition, all right? Whether they can still compete whilst the environment out there is changing, right? So they assess whether, yes, we still have that capability, right? If we don't, then what are the new skills or capabilities, in quote unquote, that the organization must adopt or must acquire? Okay, so that is the strategic planning process in brief. Okay, now. What does the risk management do in strategic planning process? Well, this helps us, right? Making risk helps us in making decision on the risk appetite, okay, which is basically about what risks would the organization be prepared to take or not to take. Okay, when we design the strategy, okay, there may be risks as well. There may be uncertainties out there. Okay, that is the question for the organization to tackle, whether they are prepared or not to take that risk or not. Okay, for instance, launching a new product, is that a great idea? Well, it may be a great idea, but remember, there are always risks of failure with new product launch. Okay, and when we push the button to launch this new product in our strategy, we will definitely deploy some resources behind it. Okay, it fails in the market. That means we are basically financially we bear the risk. Okay, and the second thing is identify the strategic risks and opportunities facing the organization and its ability to exploit or manage them. Okay, so that's the strategic planning process as well. And evaluate the existing organizational risk management processes and determine if any changes are needed. Okay, that helps us. In this instance, risk management helps us understanding that as an opportunity for us. Okay? Right, now the second thing is the project risks. Okay, project risks are basically the risks that come from project management. Okay, either organizations will definitely have projects, either new product launch projects or moving office projects or buying new equipment project. They are all projects, right? What is project? Well, briefly, a project basically has certain point of time that we need to complete. We have the goal, right, that we need to deliver in a specific time frame. That's what we mean by project in a nutshell. Okay, so when we deliver that, when we deliver the project goal, there may be something that we also need to manage. Otherwise, we may have failure for the project. Okay, and experts suggest some reasons why project fail. Okay, which are basically the sources of risk from project management perspective. Okay? Lack of consultation with clients. Okay, poor estimating of the project budget and resource requirements. Probably we are too ambitious in terms of project budgeting. So we put high aim for our revenue in regards to the project, and we under resource, so that our project fails when we push the button. Inadequate planning and scheduling, which is another common failure. Insufficient control and monitoring. Now this one here is also quite common. A lot of project managers may fail to deliver the project results because of poor control and monitor. Okay, if you're managing a project, you need to get the agreement with your stakeholders when you can do the follow-up with them. Lack of skilled project personnel. This is our role as well in regards to project management, to ensure that our team members have got the appropriate skills so they can contribute to our project. Okay? So there are the sources of risk from project management perspective. Now, next one is operational risks, okay, which is largely about dealing with established practices rather than the uncertainties associated with strategic and project risks. Okay? So about what has been practiced so far. Okay, that's what we mean by operational risk. Okay. Examples of operational risks include this one here: lack of well-established processes and procedures. Sometimes policies as well. If you don't have the policies in our operation, then it may lead us to lacking of direction and eventually failure as well. A poorly trained workforce, which is basically about our day-to-day operation. Human error, which is quite common. Lack of adequate resources, so we may under-resource on certain activities, on certain operation. Poorly maintained or obsolete equipment and software, so we don't have the appropriate equipment. Our equipment has been outdated, so it can't produce a high-quality result, for instance. So they are some examples of operational risks. Financial risk, which is basically not necessarily minimizing risk in terms of financial risk. It could also be seizing new opportunities. If we don't do that, someone else might take it. May do that. Our competitors in this instance may do that, and eventually they will outsmart us. So there are three types in here. The first one is about value that can be achieved by taking risks. This is about the opportunities. If we new product launch is an example. If we do not launch this product, for instance, our competitors may do that, and eventually they may outsmart us, or they may be more competitive in the market. Costs that can be saved by reducing risks, okay? Or this one here is about threats, managing the threats. So in our analysis, let's say, especially if we refer to the current situation where you may also have heard the Brexit, where the people in Britain have decided to leave the European Union. So there may be some risks for some businesses. Okay, so how do we cope with that? There may be some costs that we need to spend in order to save the bigger costs. Okay, resources required to manage both opportunities and threats. So that's about the financial risks as well. Okay. And then corporate governance risks, which is basically about managing the process, managing the organization. And it is about why the board members or senior manager control the organization's activities and ensure that everyone knows their responsibilities. Okay. And this means implementing legal and ethical practices. So this is one of the key points that we also need to be aware of. across the organization and monitor that they are being adhered to. Okay, so corporate governance risks is basically about implementing legal and ethical practices. Okay, now why legal and ethical practices come into our discussion risk management? Because a lot of organizations may pose some risks, and they may be penalized with hefty fines if they fail to do so. Okay, you may recall the case of VW with the emission reading that they manipulate through certain software. They have been penalized with hefty fines actually in America, and more than that, they have lost the credibility in the market for some time, basically. Okay, have they come back to be in the top position again? We don't know yet. We'll see, but it is quite hurting the business. Okay. Okay. Now, some other experts also suggest a different type of risks. These guys suggest that the risks can also be classified into hazard, control, and opportunity. Okay, hazard risks are basically, or relabeled as pure risks, are basically any negative outcomes. So when we identify that, we actually have classified these events as purely negative. All right. So what we do is basically we try to mitigate the hazard risks. Organizations will try to mitigate the hazard risks. For instance, if we have a situation in the organization where certain spots in our premise may cause some accidents, then it is hazard risks. So we need to find ways to mitigate it. Okay. The next classification is control or uncertain risks. In here, we don't know whether it will turn out to be positive or negative. Okay, so this one here is about the uncertainty associated with the benefits that the project produces. So when we launch a new product, we don't know the result yet, whether it will be positive, bringing more revenue and profit, or whether it will be a failure, therefore we are going to lose money. Okay, so this is what we decide as control risk. Therefore, from risk management perspective, this comes under the management of control risks. Okay, and the next one is opportunity or speculative risks. Okay, which is basically positive. If we don't seize this opportunity, that means we are going to have what we call as opportunity loss. Okay, so there are some types of risks as well from a different perspective. Now let's talk about the tools. We have several tools in here: lessons learned, checklist, diagramming, brainstorming, Delphi techniques, and also SWOT analysis. Okay? I'm not going to discuss all of them, just taking you through, guys, with the main ones here, like the checklist. With the checklist, we are actually listing down some questions in regards to where are the risks likely to come from, who is likely to pose the risks, the size of the risks, and the situations that condition the risks, the likelihood of the risks. Okay? And these are the areas that we can look at in terms of checklists. And some other experts also suggest what they call as a fishbone or Ishikawa diagram or cause and effect diagram, which is basically starting from the effect. This is the problem, which is basically effect. And from there, we step back to find out the possible causes. And these possible causes are basically the risk events, okay? And this is an example of the Ishikawa diagram. So here, a wiring faults in the installation. What could be the causes? What are the possible causes? From people perspective, probably because of the not inappropriate training, or the training is not enough. And the management did not identify the failure in the process, and so on and so forth. They are basically our risk events. Okay. Flowcharts is another tool. Engineers love that. Love flowcharts techniques to look at the possible risks. And in terms of flowcharts, we now look at certain symbols such as circles, rectangles, diamond, or parallelogram. And each of them, flowcharts, is basically helping us to understand how the process goes. And each of the steps in here basically tells us a risk. Okay, receive orders by email, it may not happen. That is risk. Anything in here could be risk for us. Okay, and brainstorming, which is one of my favorite technique. I often do that as well in my corporate life. And some questions that we can ask in the brainstorming session includes what, how, when, who, why. So they are the questions that helps us probing the risk events. All right, now this one here is quite important. All right, this is what we call as the risk register table. Okay, we need to have this in our assessment. Here we have the risk, likelihood, impact, priority, treatment plan, and we haven't discussed until the treatment plan yet. We just need to list down the risk events with your assessment tasks and also likelihood and impact. Follow the assessment brief. Okay, and at the end of the module 6, we need to complete everything in the risk register table. Okay. All right. So that's basically a little bit about the second module. Now, assessment 1. These are the tasks in our assessment 1. Again, for this one here, the IAS NZS ISO 31009. If you type that in your Google search box, you'll find tons of articles, but I'm going to upload the ones I have from my own learning resources. There you go. The second one here is about the scope of risk management required in your role. Please make sure you read the case study, Blue Horizon Business, and identify and describe the critical success factors of the objectives. And this one, the next one is the stakeholders. And there you go. Identify at least 4 risks for the project, and you also need to make a report to the CEO and type an email to the CEO. Okay, okay. We expect you to go through the module 2 and start assessment 1, which is due next week, and attempt the tasks. Now, let's have a look at the assessment briefly. This is our assessment, and that's the introduction, a bit of overview of the assessment, which is basically what Blue Horizon. They are actually expanding the business, so a bit of rebranding project in there, a bit of outlet or retail management in there as well. Okay, and please read the appendix as well, because that tells us a lot of information. And site visits, and please make sure that you read these as well, including the appendix 3. And the other thing I'd like to show you is this one here. Okay, now make sure when you address the assessment tasks, make sure you use this template. In my experience, students who do not use the template may overlook the tasks. Okay, to me, as long as you address all tasks, it should be fine. But there is a pretty good chance that we may overlook a couple of tasks, right? One or two tasks if you don't use the template. Okay, please make sure you download the template, because the template is pretty straightforward, I guess, and that tells us a lot. Okay. Okay, so that's basically tonight's topic. Any questions so far, Jeff?
Yes, that was the risk chart that you showed a few minutes ago that you were showing us. Mm-hmm. Not that one. The other one. I think it was the risk management one.
Mm-hmm.
No, back before then.
The assessment brief.
No, before then.
You mean my own presentation slides?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Now, do we have to put that in the assessment?
Not for this one.
Okay.
Not for this one, because for this assessment one, you just need to follow this one here. Okay.
Yep.
The first one is about risk review report, scope, critical success factors, objectives, stakeholders, right, and risk identification. Yep. You identify the 4 risks, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you explain the 4 risks that you have identified, and you write the email. Now, what about the email? The email contains the highlights, right? The first part in here is basically your detailed report, and the highlights should be in your email.
The highlights, okay, yep.
Yeah, just the highlight for your email. Dear Manny Binskin, you explain, right? Based on your analysis, you identify the following risks, for instance.
Okay. How much you got to write for it though? You actually fill in that whole bit there?
Yeah, basically, I do not want to limit people with number of words, because that goes back to people's writing style. And as long as you have captured the main points from here, you have explained your highlight about your risks, the 4 risks that you have identified, the stakeholders that you discuss, highlight about the key critical success factors, scope, and also objectives, you are fine. Just the highlight for each from each section. Yeah.
Yep, I understand. No problem. That's
right. Good. All good?
Yep. No worries. Yep. All good.
Brilliant. I'm going to upload the link and also the files that I presented tonight. Thanks, Jeff, for joining me tonight.
No worries. Thank you very much, Eddie.
No worries. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Cheers.